Hello again, everyone. I wanted to talk to you today about the article by Christopher Heathwood. He is the head of the philosophy department at the University of Colorado, and he's talking about objectivism and subjectivism in this article, as you know if you've read it. And he talks about himself being an objectivist when it comes to morals, but a subjectivist when it comes to welfare. We're going to see if he can have it both ways. First, he says objectivism in morality must be true. He says I take it as true that everyone believes that burning cats for amusement is wrong. And I've yet to encounter anyone who doesn't believe that is morally wrong. And it's not wrong because people think so, he says. People think so because it's wrong. No one would think that being that cruel was anything but wrong. So then that's the camel in the door argument. Once you have one example of what an objective truth is, then you're going to find other objective moral truths. So objective moral truths then can be like mathematics. We just know them. You can say that you know them rationally or intuitively, but there's an example of one that we just know. But then he says this other thing that he tries to discuss for most of the article, that he's a subjectivist about welfare. So what is good for us, he says, depends upon the individual human being or the subject. So he's an objectivist about morality, which, by the way, objectivism is the belief that something is true independent of what a perceiver thinks. So 3 times 3 is 9 is true regardless of what any perceiver thinks. The same thing would be true about morality, that what I just said about the burning cats example, it's wrong independent of what anyone thinks. So now back to the subjectivism about welfare. He has examples in there of like Charlie, who moved out west so that he could avail himself of the higher speed limits and he would have more freedom to drive fast. But he finds out upon doing this that it's of no benefit to him. It doesn't really particularly like going faster. So then Heathwood adopts the idea that it's just freedom is just a subjective good. Whether it's good or not, in other words, depends upon the user of it and whether it benefits him or not. Now let's go back to objectivism for a second, because this is a compare and contrast between these two doctrines, objectivism and subjectivism. Objectivists would just line up these objective goods and say that these are all objective goods. The one issue pertaining to health, we could say health is an objective good. It's good independent of whether you value it or not. Learning, you could say, is another objective good. Objectivists would probably say freedom is another objective good, regardless of whether you take advantage of it or use it properly. For example, go back to health for a second. It's an objective good, even if you misuse it and squander your health, smoke 4 packs of cigarettes a day or something of that sort. It doesn't mean that health is no good. It means that health is a good, but you ignored it, or you took advantage of it, or took it for granted. Now the subjectivist, go back to the subjectivist line, he says that the subjectivist, though, will regard these goods as good merely if they benefit him or her. And so I don't know if that can work. The example, if you take the Charlie example, if that's true that freedom is only subjectively good because there are people like Charlie that don't appreciate it fully, you might say in this case, he has too narrow an appreciation of freedom. Freedom is good for many other things, learning, developing a lifestyle, setting objectives or goals for yourself. But he doesn't see it in these broader terms. He only sees it as how fast he can drive his vehicle. So you might say that in these kinds of instances that the subjectivist is wrong about this for failing to appreciate fully what the objective goods are. After all, if we could say that about freedom, that it's only subjectively good, then we could say that about all the others. Notice that the objectivists would say were objectively good. For example, health. If I were to misuse my health or take it for granted or just assume that it was always going to be there and drank as much as I want, ate as much as I want, and smoked more than I need, then you would say that health is of no value to me because I don't see the benefit of it. There seems like there's something wrong with that. I think we might rather say that health is objectively good, but that people squander it at some point. So this is a tension that runs throughout the article, and in the course of developing this subjective theory of welfare, he has a kind of what you might call the desire theory of well-being. The desire theory of well-being says that I have these desires, I desire X, and if I fulfill that desire, it's a good. Well, that's true much of the time. We should be generous to that thesis first. I desire to learn calculus, I desire to fall in love, I desire to have a house and have a car, and I achieve those desires, and those things are good. But of course, not achieving all desires isn't necessarily good. He has an example of a serial killer who achieves his desires to kidnap and murder women. Clearly, this kind of desire is not once fulfilled, is not a good thing. And the example of the person who likes cherry pie, but the cherry pie makes them ill. So the desire theory of welfare is going to have to be corrected. He realizes that, and so this is one of the problems that subjectivism will have. That just because you desire something, or it makes some connection to your own desire for this item or that item, does not mean it's automatically good. So this is a start with Heathwood. This is what he's all about. We'd have to say, I think, with the objectivist, if you're going to take an objectivist line, that some desires are worthwhile, and they're worthwhile having and worthwhile fulfilling, and others are not. You could, with not too much effort, make a list of the ones that are worth having, might be a good exercise, and ones not worth having. Because the ones that are not worth having might be self-destructive or destructive of other people's interests. The ones worth having would be things that you would want to achieve, and you could perhaps build a life of value around. So that's my start for you with Heathwood. We'll be discussing this further as we go along. It's not an easy article. You have to kind of stay with it because there are these theories going on here and not more examples. So we'll have to come up with more examples as we go. So thank you.